Well, welcome back to the Mouse and Men, where we explore the grown-up side of Disney. I'm Bradley. I'm here with my co-caster, Chris, CCC. Chris, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. I've been waiting to talk about this movie for a while. I've been waiting to watch this movie, and now that I've gotten out of the way, I've got so much to talk about. So we are reviewing and talking about what we thought about the movie Soul, Disney Pixar's latest offering.
Yeah, so it came out Christmas Day. I've watched it a couple times, just try to get a feel for it. Loved it. My wife's first thing as soon as it ended is she said, there's so much there, I've got to go watch it again to let it all sink in. So, spoiler alert, there will likely be spoilers in this episode. So if you have not seen Soul, just skip this episode until you've seen it, unless you don't mind knowing what happens at the end. But do let us know what you thought of Soul over on social media, because you can find us at the Mouse and Men on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. You can find us on YouTube, where we broadcast the podcast, and you can get all that information plus our top 10 things for adults to do, grown-ups to do in Walt Disney World over at our website, themouseandmen.com. What a mouthful that was.
Good job, though. You handled it well.
Let's get into Soul, one of my favorite movies maybe ever. Wow. We'll get to it right now. So, Chris, you just watched this for the first time just in the last week or so.
Yeah.
Give me some initial thoughts. What'd you think?
Okay, I will do that. I want to do a shameless plug that, knowing that we are in unprecedented times right now with the COVID-19 pandemic, this should have been a Christmas Day, everybody go to the theater, pile in with your family, watch from the theater. But because of the pandemic, it premiered on Disney Plus, which I was excited about as a fan, as a subscriber to Disney Plus. I was excited that I could just turn it on whenever I want to. And I was going to sit down with my family and watch it from beginning to end. But because it being on Disney Plus, I knew it was there. So what I want to say is we will be talking about the movie Soul. And if you haven't watched it yet, maybe skip this episode until you do. But just as a shameless plug for Disney Plus, please go watch it soon. Because, as good as this opportunity is to be able to watch a movie, a first-run movie, a feature film that should be in theaters right in your home the day that it would be coming out, they need to see that those numbers are higher. So please go watch Soul. The sooner the better, in my opinion, because I let it sit there for a little bit, but I shouldn't have, because I want Disney to know that I'm a fan of all these movies and that it's coming to me right in my living room whenever I want to. So please go watch the movie soon and then come back and listen to this as well. But all of that to say.
And it wasn't for lack of trying, because as we talked about previously, on Christmas Day, your internet and cell phone service was knocked out. And so there was no getting to watch Soul on Christmas Day. And so, once you get connection back up and running, life comes at you fast, and weeks go by before, I need to go back and watch Soul. But we decided to do this review, and you kind of had to for this purposes. So what were your first thoughts?
Oh man, I mean, such an amazing story, and I've come to expect nothing less than Pixar. They always bring it. They just know how to tell a story in all of its iterations over all of the time. They get it right in the end. And it's amazing to watch some of the behind the scenes Pixar things, just to show all the iterations that these films or stories go through before the end result that we watch. And it's again, another Pixar knock out of the park for me. Again, I was telling you before we started that I almost have to look at Pixar movies now, look at the plot or look at the type of movie that it is, and divide it up in two different categories. One of like the Monsters, Inc., Toy Story, Incredibles, Cars, that level of Pixar movie that I know that I'm going to learn something and get a lesson out of the movie, but I'm also primarily going to be entertained. But I think in a movie like Soul and then others like Wall-E, Inside Out, that it's almost up to a degree that it's almost the opposite. That I know I'm going to be entertained because it's a Pixar film, but I'm going to learn so much. And so some are like entertainment forward, and then you learn a nice little lesson on the back end. Others are you're going to learn a life lesson here that could cause an existential crisis if you're not careful, and then you're going to be entertained as a result of watching this. And so it's like two different types of Pixar movies for me moving forward. And this falls in the I'm going to be inspired so much that I'm going to have to take a good long look in the mirror while I'm being entertained in a Pixar movie. So it blew me away. The movie, the themes, the lessons that I learned, and I can't now wait to watch it again with my family, so they can also have some of those lessons that they're learning as well. What about you?
Yeah. So my first thought after watching this movie is it is not a kids movie. It's animated, but it's not a kids movie. And if you go back to interviews with Walt Disney himself after the first animated feature film, which was Snow White, he talks about not wanting to create an animated movie for children. He wanted people to feel the whole range of emotions. He wanted them to feel scared. He wanted them to feel sorrow. He wanted them to feel happiness. He wanted to touch all the emotions. And he made it for adults. And you go into the premiere of Snow White, and you had people coming out who, are women having to fix their makeup. Same thing with Mary Poppins. That you have people coming out who have puffy eyes because they've been crying because the movie touched them in that way. And this absolutely not. It's appropriate for children to watch, but they're not going to get it.
Right. Yeah.
And I think some of that storytelling that Disney lost, I think, after The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, kind of the early 90s,
right,
it started to tail off. And this is getting to some of my Disney historian nerddom. Michael Eisner was CEO at the time. He saw the company go through, kind of the first Disney decade, which with those movies I just mentioned. And then his number two in control tragically passed away in a helicopter crash. And after that, he didn't have a true number two for years, and it made things difficult. So they had some flops with, and maybe not flops, but they weren't that same standard. About that time, enter Pixar with Toy Story, and all of a sudden, the torch was kind of passed. And I don't think it was intentional to Pixar for storytelling. And I think you see this most in the places where there are no dialogue. So, in Soul, towards the end, Joe, who's a jazz pianist and middle school band teacher, sits down at his piano. He's kind of like, I thought when my life changed, it would be different. And I feel the same. And he sits down and he gets into what the movie calls the zone, which is where, your spark just takes you to another place. And for a couple of minutes, there's no dialogue, but it tells an entire story. I think there's some of that in Inside Out. There's definitely that in the first half or so of Wall-E, the first third.
Oh, Wall-E, yeah.
And the first 15 minutes of Up.
Yes.
And to be able to touch all those emotions without uttering a single word, that's great storytelling. And it's through animation, it's through visuals, but it's still great storytelling. And that's kind of the mark of a good storyteller, in my opinion, when it comes to movies.
Yeah, and I completely agree. To several points that you just made. One, that Aladdin, Lion King, Beauty and the Beast timeframe, late 80s, early 90s of Disney animation, and that classic hand-drawn animation style, with a few computer generated graphics thrown in. I
Yeah.
remember seeing the Aladdin ride when he was on the
Magic carpet ride. Yeah. It's
through the
got
lava. Yeah.
it's got some early computer generated stuff.
Yeah.
The ballroom dancing scene of Beauty and the Beast.
Yep.
They're just trying it out. And
the wildebeest coming down the mountain or into the ravine on the Lion King, all computer generated. So
yeah,
it's
and they were just
experimental
testing
time.
it. Yeah, it's like, we got to test it because at that time it was expensive. Your computers for those things were expensive. It took a lot of people, a lot of man hours to do that, and it's like, we might as well just have a couple people draw it and paint it. But yeah, that exploration, that innovation.
Yeah. But those are highly successful movies. But then it started to take a dip into maybe the Home on the Range and the Treasure Planet.
Hercules. I think
Hercules was kind of in
Hunchback.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're getting some of those characters, but not quite the story.
Yeah, they just didn't have the same box office success, because I think the story was just not quite there. Maybe there was shuffling because of instability at the top of Disney at the time. Maybe it was, just trying to push things through because, hey, look how successful we've been.
Yeah.
Everything we do is great. But for whatever reason, it kind of passed over to Pixar, and they have done a fantastic job with it.
I mean, I think that at this point now, there have been 23 Pixar movies released since Toy Story initially came out back in the mid 90s. But you're right. It's hard to compare different Pixar movies because they all feel so special to me.
Yeah.
I think about the last 25 years that Pixar has been putting out films, and they all tie into a specific part in my history. So it's hard. I was going to ask you where Soul falls in line of your favorite Pixar movies, but for me, it's hard to even pick a how to rank them because of, one, what they've meant to me from a storytelling nostalgia piece where I was in life, and then also just the amazement of seeing an entire film computer generated, like with Toy Story or A Bug's Life, and then just like the next level makes me think about my life and existence that they are able to pull off with movies like Up, Inside Out, Soul, those types of movies. So just, it's incredible the journey that I've been on with Pixar. So it's really hard to pick where this falls in line for me as far as a favorite movie versus a favorite Pixar movie. What about you?
Yeah. So thinking back through those Pixar movies, when Toy Story was released, I was right at that age where, okay, I'm kind of outgrowing Disney movies at this point, but I've got a younger brother who's 7 years younger. So he was not quite to the place where he can really understand what's going on. It's just colors on the screen with some noise. And so he had the Buzz Lightyear outfit. I think he had a Woody doll, he had all the Toy Story stuff. I always thought it was great. It was just, it's a great story. The animation was so cool. It had never been done before to that scale. And then I remember Bug's Life being good. I remember Up, watching it for the first time as a family at the house. And it was just like, dang, those first 15 minutes or whatever, 12 minutes, that could just be the movie right there. Cars, I think I identified with Mater so much because I think I saw that in theaters because my brother was kind of at that same age that I was when Toy Story came out. He's still into it, but that one, because now it's Cars, it's you can kind of make it work a little bit longer, a little bit wider age range. But I love that movie. So when it came out on DVD when I was in college, I went at midnight, got it at midnight at Walmart, went home, watched it,
Nice.
then got a few hours of sleep before class, went to class, came back and watched it again. So that's up there. Then you get to Wall-E. I was just amazed at the storytelling first half of that movie alone. Then you get Inside Out. And Inside Out, I think, is when they really started getting into, how do we, I think you mentioned this before we got started, existential crises. How do we get people in that place? That one just blew me away at how they were able to take something so complex and make it so simple that even kids understand, hey, I've got these different emotions and they're trying to vie for who's in control.
Yeah.
Then you get to Soul, and it's all about trying to find your spark. And what does it mean when you find your spark and your spark aligns with, your career path, what you want to do, whatever, things don't always end up like you think they'd end up.
Yeah.
It was great. It's something where I've got no problem with my child watching it, but there were a couple of jokes that's like, he gets to the, what's it called?
The Great Beyond.
The Great Beyond. Yeah. They said, is this heaven? No. Is this HE double hockey sticks? And all the little souls that are supposed to be, kind of like little babies go, hell, 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 hell. It's like the ducks from Finding Nemo, which is another fantastic story. So there's that. Then when Joe goes in to have his suit fixed at his mom's tailor shop, he plants a kiss. If you hear some rumbling, it's my son running upstairs. He plants a kiss on one of the girls who works there, right on the lips. And the other girl sitting across from her says, "Cougar." Look, when my son is old enough to ask, "Hey, what does she mean by cougar?" I don't want to have to explain that. But there were only a couple of those jokes. It's like, you know what? I hope it just goes over kids' heads until they're, in their 20s, because I don't want to have to explain it. But the way that they make it for adults, but not inaccessible to kids, I don't know how they do it.
Yeah. And again, for me, the themes that they're able to wrestle with, when I first watched it, I kind of knew what I was getting into, or at least I thought I did. This is going to be a guy that finally gets his chance to make his dreams come true. And let's see what happens when he gets to do that. And then it went on some whole different tangent that if you haven't watched the movie and you're still listening, throwing some spoiler kind of things in here, but most of this, what we've talked about thus far, is what you can kind of glean from watching the preview. So I don't think that we've even gone too far into that. But yeah, just the whole idea that getting exactly what you want in life is not always the thing that you thought it was going to be. And a hero like Joe wrestling with that idea of like, now that I have it, why isn't it giving me why isn't it filling me up like I thought it was going to, or that people told me that it would my whole life? So I love the journey that he's able to go in, and Disney / Pixar, they always do such a good job too of character development, even the small characters that you're associating yourself. You're thinking a lot about Joe as the hero, but then you have all the Jerrys that's in the Great Beyond. You have all the new souls. You have 22 that he kind of pals around with for the majority of the movie. The development of all of the characters at all the different levels are so good. You just, before you know it, you're like, wow, I'm crying a little bit here and it's already at the end of the movie. Like, how did Pixar do this to me again? Like, shame on me for getting into this every time. And like, Pixar made me cry again. Come on. So
I fell for it again. Yeah. It's really fantastic. In just the way they hit on certain topics, like I mentioned before, there's this moment where you get into the zone, and I think most of us have experienced that, but it's in the same area of the great beyond as the lost souls. And they showed the connection between being in the zone and then it being just a little too much and it becomes an obsession. And then you're a lost soul, and it's kind of an addiction, but it's a great way to kind of look at it and say, what is it that takes somebody from, they had such a promising career, they had such a promising trajectory, and something happened and they became this lost soul. Well, this illustration kind of helps with that. It's not easy for kids to fully understand the whole depth of that. It's not easy for adults to fully understand the depth of that. But the way they do it is just fantastic.
Yeah. I thought it was so good how they show the different ways of that passion, that thing that you are obsessed with, and how that's a good thing, but how that mountaintop experience of being in the zone, being in flow, feeling that where everything else kind of disappears, it's an amazing transcendent experience to be a part of, but you can't live there forever.
Yeah.
And to be able to take that as fellow humans, part of our job is to not only take what we are passionate about and what we love, but then also help others to see along the way too. And so it's like, we find this passion or this spark when we're young, but we develop it over time. And then eventually, hopefully, we're doing it at such a level that we can then turn around and give this as now a gift to the next person coming along. And I think that was such a beautiful job of how Pixar showed that we have these ideas that are inside of us, but that we're often mentored by someone else to really feel that spark come alive into something. And so, again, the fact that they were taking something that's so hard to fathom, hard to define, these things that are up in our head, like with In and Out or Inside Out, with emotions, with this movie, with passion, with the spark, that thing that we are obsessed with, and how to show it in a way to where in an hour and a half or 2 hour story, we can see all of those things that are kind of up here and hard to define, but they're represented in a creative and artistic way for a Pixar movie. So again, I applaud them for the amount of thinking that they made me do when I think about this subject a lot anyway, and how this took me to even new levels.
Yeah. Something that I love, and this will kind of be one of my last thoughts on the movie. At the end, again, this is a little bit of a spoiler. The main character is mentoring this soul who has not been born yet. And it's her turn. I guess it's a her. She's got the soul has a female voice, but this soul who's never been born, it's her turn to go to Earth and experience life. And it's scary because you have to go up to this ledge, jump off, and plummet towards Earth. And she's scared. And because Joe was her mentor, Joe gets to go with her and kind of say goodbye. And he says, "Don't worry, I'll go with you." And she says, you can't go the whole way. At some point you jump off, but then you get sucked back up. And he says, "I know, but I'll go as far as I can." And wow. It's just that moment where, your eyes are starting to water and then it's just waterworks. Yeah. What a beautiful picture of what friendship is, because we can't always walk with somebody as far as they're going to go, but we'll go as far as we can. And then, just to give them comfort while we can. And then it's up to them. But just a great little moment there at the end of the story that I think is kind of that pinnacle moment for that relationship in the movie. I love it. It's from beginning to end, another spectacular production from Pixar.
Agreed. That's something that I didn't even consider until now, is that how it kind of shows the relationship of people that mentor us. It's just another one of those Pixar things to where they can, in a few frames of a feature film, say something that's so profound and do it in such a beautiful way that when they're like holding hands together and they're hurtling towards Earth, how the mentor is there for a long part of that ride, but eventually, and it kind of looked like that 22 had to make the decision to let go and to kind of start to drift away, and how it was okay. She, or 22, voiced by a female character, or a Tina Fey, had to make the choice to let go herself and then to, face life without the mentor, which just sums up how we all are as humans. We have parents and teachers and mentors from an early age, but they can only take us so far before we have to choose to let go. And I could cry right now talking about it again, thinking about the implications of what that means for us being fathers, for us being sons at some point, or being mentored by other people coming along. That it's such a human thing to go through, that we can't just hold on to our mentor the whole time, that eventually that relationship in some way changes, whether it be the death of the mentor, or they move on, or we move on, or whatever. But again, that was something that I didn't even consider, and something that's so profound. I need to go back and watch that scene just to experience that part again. So many different levels that Pixar continually takes me on. I could not be a bigger fan of Pixar specifically, and all the movies that they've put out.
Agreed. So if you haven't watched it, go watch it, not once, but twice. And if you've seen it once, go watch it again.
Mm-hmm.
What stood out to you? What was that thing that just made it a great movie to you? Or was it not so great? And tell us why you think it was just ho-hum or even awful. Tell us that over on social media. Chris, it's time for plussing, and I'm really excited because really interesting plussing that ties into our topic this week.
Plussing.
Yeah, so for plussing today, we had something that we were going ahead and moving on with when it comes to plussing, but after watching the movie, having some conversations with you, I realized that in my other world as a therapist, part of what I do is just walk through life with people from wherever they are currently to where some of the goals that they want to meet. And so part of my job as a therapist is to sit down with people and to talk about those goals, and then to try to make a plan to make those goals a reality, and we move towards them. And so a lot of the themes that I've been talking about recently in some of those confidential sessions have to do with the very themes in the movie that we just watched with Soul, talking about what is that spark that you have? What does that say about you? What do you then go on and do with it? Do you make a career out of it, or is it just a hobby? All of these kinds of things are kind of those human questions that we all ask. That do we follow our bliss? Do we follow that thing that makes us excited to get up every day? Or do we go to that job that we have to do because we were told that we needed to do it, or our parents forced us into this field, or that we think that we can't do anything else because we have to keep the lights on, so to speak. And so a lot of those conversations that I have talks about this very theme of what do you do with that thing that's inside of you that you're passionate about. So all that being said, two plussing points today is that I'm currently reading through a book called Ikigai. And this is the Japanese secret to a long and happy life. It's a pretty short book. It's an easy read.
Those are my favorites. Bonus if they have pictures, but short is up there.
There are a few diagrams in here, but Ikigai talks about, it's essentially a Japanese word. The word Ikigai is the Japanese term which translated, it means a reason for being. And so as you can see up on the screen right now, if you're watching, we have a diagram of Ikigai. If you're not watching us on YouTube right now and listening to it on the podcast, do a quick Google search for Ikigai image or diagram, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But Ikigai is essentially wrapped up in 4 different quadrants that overlap in kind of a Venn diagram that talks about what you love. 2 is what the world needs. 3 is what you can be paid for. And 4, what you're good at. And so if you can make a list of each of those 4 things and start seeing some of the relationships, you can start to see not only what you're good at and what you have a passion for, but maybe what the world needs and they can pay you for it. And so talking about what we want to do with our life, what is our life's purpose, oftentimes this easy to kind of sum up and look at diagram can help other people to start to see like, oh, maybe I do have a passion for this. And maybe I can't be paid for this specific thing, but if I do it in this other way, I can be paid for it in a way that I can live my passion through what I'm doing day in and day out.
I love it. And for those who are listening on the podcast, Chris, how do you spell that? Ikigai?
Oh, that's good. Because it is an interesting spelling. Ikigai. So Ikigai spells Ikigai.
Love it.
When I first said it out loud, my son thought I was talking about a gross male, he was an icky guy. So
well,
it's like, no.
You show me that diagram and it's great because, passions, callings, whatever you want to spark, like they call it in soul, whatever that is, how do you reconcile that with actually having to pay the bills and support a family? And what a great way to kind of look at it, make lists and see where they all overlap.
Yeah.
And say, okay, this is where I'm going to put my focus, because when I put my focus there, I focus on what I enjoy doing. I'm also focusing on providing for my family, and it all kind of comes together. So I love it. What a great plussing to go along with soul. Yeah. This is going to be one that goes down as a favorite. Been rewatching a lot of Pixar movies, if for no other reason than trying to keep my son entertained while I'm trying to cook dinner for him. Just so he doesn't go bother his mom who's working at that time. Monsters Inc., such a great story idea on why kids are scared of the monsters in the closet. Wall-E, just kind of in unobtrusive way to look at not necessarily global warming, but just taking care of the earth that we have. You've got Up about, not isolating yourself off and always finding that sense of adventure. A Bug's Life, kind of same way, go find your adventure. Toy Story, what if toys could talk? I mean, just idea after idea. I don't know where they come up with these ideas. It's fantastic. I love it. So I can't wait to see what's next from Pixar.
Yeah.
Because they're kind of setting themselves up for failure at some point. But home run after home run.
Yeah. And as a secondary plussing to what we were talking about with Ikigai, and an episode of the TV show Inside Pixar that's also on Disney Plus that we talked about a few weeks ago. It's a great look behind the scenes at the Pixar artists, story developers, directors, all of these people, and what they do to make the movies that they end up coming up with. The very first episode of the first season is with Kemp Powers, who is the co-director of Soul. And so just a recommendation for him, talking about his experience, his unique experience, and how he brought his unique viewpoint into telling the story of Joe through Soul. So highly recommend that episode of Inside Pixar as well. And just to tie it in too with the Ikigai thing, that he was passionate about music, but he also realized that he was such a good teacher and mentor that was a big part of the movie as well. And so looking at what Joe is good at and kind of sort of creating his Ikigai. What does the world need that Joe could provide? What is he good at? What does he love to do? What can he be compensated for? That kind of, those are the questions that he's even answering through the movie. So I recommend Soul wholeheartedly. I recommend looking up this diagram of Ikigai and then reading the book if you're interested. But then watch the movie. Go watch that Inside Pixar episode as well to see a cool next level view of how Kemp and the rest of the team are putting that story together.
Yes, yes, and yes. I agree to all of it. And again, Soul, it's not a kids movie.
Yeah.
There's a lot to digest, a lot to chew on, a lot to process. So, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but don't grow up too fast.
But like all of these characters, and like we continue to do every day, keep exploring.